Hello and welcome to what episode I believe is 258 of Sutton Impact Family Style. I'm Jason.
I'm Bill, and I guess the big news of the week is that there will be baseball. There will be 162 games, but you got to scratch your head and say, okay, we held out for 100 days because of what? And the only sizable changes were the money they agreed on at DH in the National League, which for the players that makes sure that a lot of guys that were toward the tail end of their career have a shot at playing another year if they were a good hitter.
Yeah.
So I can see that for the veterans. The rookies got more money. The younger players got better arbitration money. But, you get a 12-team playoff now, which, I'm glad it's not 14, but I'm still not thrilled it's 12.
12's a lot.
If you're going to play 162 games, you shouldn't be playing 162 games to produce 12 teams.
No.
I don't think. I think that's just poor. Saw a couple free agent signings. We'll see some more this week. And the rich will continue to be richer, and the poor will continue to be poorer. And I don't see any change until there's ever a floor and a ceiling. And if there's not going to be a floor and a ceiling, then it's not going to really make a difference.
No. And like we said, I mean, if you're going to hold out for 100 days, you're going to get the negativity on both sides. Although I am happy to say that it seemed like the majority of people that seemed to be commenting on it were definitely more pro player than pro owner. There wasn't the millionaires, billionaires argument. It seemed like they were like, no, these players are getting screwed and they need to get better, which was nice to see.
Yeah, I
But
saw that.
but you did all this and you didn't really walk away with much. And outside of the negative stamp on baseball, you didn't really you didn't even get the pitch clock or any of the extra things that the shift, some of the things that may have helped the game itself, the on-field product.
Yeah, those are all on tap for 2023, but they're not approved yet.
Yeah.
I mean, but the Major League Baseball can implement them with 45 days notice, so they will happen. But I don't know, the no shift thing is, I like the no shift thing, and I do like the pitch clock, because those are two issues.
Yeah.
And so we'll have to see how those things go.
Because again, like we said last week,
those things are important to me.
yeah, you get the argument of, is some of the, even if analytics are true, like if 1+1 it's 2, and the shift is something that clearly works against certain hitters, like is it still good for the game and the product you're watching on field, which ultimately it needs to be, and it's not. So, you got to get that stuff out.
Yeah. So I'm rooting for Noah Syndergaard to be comeback player of the year with the Angels.
Okay.
Because he really hasn't played much in 2 years, and he was a flamethrower when he was Thor. So I want to see if he can resurrect his career. I think that'd be fun to see playing with Trout and Ohtani. So, I mean, I'd like to see that happen.
And I guess while we're here, I've seen arguments on both sides, but as our residential Pirate fan, and we are, a Pittsburgh-centric podcast, Josh Reynolds, you don't trade him, right?
Brian Reynolds? No
Brian
way.
Reynolds. Sorry, yeah.
If they trade him, I will drop my tickets immediately. Immediately. I won't even debate. That would be the proverbial last straw for me.
Because you've got him locked up.
If they don't re-sign him and keep him long term, whenever he's done, I'm done. That's my official position. I came back after McCutcheon. I will not come back after this one.
That seems to be the general consensus, and hopefully the Pirates figure that out, because it just...
Yeah, but I'm adamant on this one. I am drawing the hard line in the sand. This is done.
Yeah, because there's no line of... I know he was one of the prospects from the McCutcheon trade. But
yeah, and he actually worked out better than anybody thought.
Yeah, and at the same time, though, you can't trade a player that is to become a fan favorite. He's an all-star. He's along with Brian Hayes and some other guys are like your Rainies of hope, and you can't trade him for another pile of prospects.
Yeah.
You might as well just sell the team to another city at that point if that's what you're going to do.
Yep, I would be officially done.
Yeah. Well, I think we got. I mean, I know basketball is exciting, but I think we got to go NFL because we had some big, giant NFL things this week.
Big trades. The Russell Wilson trade, mystifies me because that was a lot to give up for a 33-year-old quarterback that did not have a stellar last 2 seasons.
And
I just don't think Denver was. If Denver was a player away, and he told me if Denver was a quarterback away from winning, then I would say, okay, you have a narrow window here. I could see it, but I'm sorry, I don't see that one at all.
Because what people don't talk about is, I mean, you got the 2 first rounds, the 2 second rounds. I mean, the defensive lineman is a nice prospect. He's probably going to be a rotation guy. Drew Lock is obviously garbage. But Noah Fant was their first round pick 2 years ago in Denver. So you essentially gave up 3 first round picks. And if you're Seattle, you got a guy that's been very passive aggressive, has a history of not being well liked. you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like Richard Sherman and some of those other guys have made it pretty clear that Russ was not the most well liked person in the locker room. Last year he comes out with that, BS article where he's like, I'm not asking to be traded, but if they wanted to trade me, I'd like to go to these 4 cities.
Yeah.
Like the most passive aggressive, like sort of, and apparently, he's considered somewhat of a phony amongst his peers. So if you're Seattle, you could argue, getting rid of him at 33 for that haul, despite the fact that quarterback's the most important position. And as Steeler fans, we know very well that there's just not a lot of them out there.
All right, but we would take Patrick Mahomes over him.
Oh,
I would take Justin Herbert over him.
easily. Josh Allen?
There's 2 in the same division.
Yeah.
So then we have what, Derek Allen?
Josh Allen.
Carr?
Yeah, Josh Allen. I mean, Derek Carr's not bad.
No, Derek Carr's not bad, but I mean, that's the division you just traded yourself to.
Yeah. And obviously, if you're an athlete, the mentality is.
I don't know if, I don't see how you make that trade, understanding that unless you felt you had to have him to compete with those other guys. But you can compete with those other guys. I don't think you're going to beat those other guys.
No. I don't. I mean, and because obviously on top of that, like you've already got Bosa on one side, and they just traded for Khalil Mack, who I know hasn't played excellent for the Bears. He had a lot of injuries the last 2 years, but if they get him healthy with Justin Herbert and then Pat Mahomes being Pat Mahomes, that's a devastating 1-2 punch. To bring in a guy that, like we said, has just not performed super well, And like we talked about a little bit off air, like he came in the league as a very underrated 3rd-round prospect that nobody thought much about, Won the starting job.
A lot of eyes that, he wasn't 6'1", whatever he really is. That, a shorter quarterback, but he was mobile and he was, got a lot of attention. He did a lot of things well. But he played on a team with a great defense. And he won a Super Bowl with the defense.
Yeah.
And then really not a lot since.
Both the times he went to the Super Bowl, the time he won and the time he lost in that stupid play call to the Patriots where he threw the interception, he had Marshawn Lynch, a great offensive line, and the Legion of Boom, which is, you could argue is a historically great defense. And it's not to say he didn't contribute to those wins, but, he wasn't, he wasn't flinging it all over the field.
No.
And I guess we'll do our Steeler minute right here. We're both, as I paid more attention to the draft and scouts and listening to everybody, I'm sort of out on almost every quarterback in the 1st round for this year's draft. I'd rather get a stud.
I don't think it's a significant upgrade over Mason Rudolph. And you play, you see what he's worth, and then you make a decision next year. I've said that all along. I don't want them to spend it. They have too many holes to spend money on a quarterback, especially if they can't protect them.
And like we said, Mahomes, Allen, Herbert, in our own division, Joe Burrow, who just went to a Super Bowl and looks outstanding. Lamar Jackson, who, isn't everybody's cup of tea, but won an MVP, and he's got a Ravens team that's coming back healthy. Then you still have guys like Zach, what's-his-face of the Jets in his 2nd year as the number 2 overall pick, and Trevor Lawrence, supposedly the best quarterback of a generation also in the AFC. So I feel like unless you think the guy you're getting can be one of those guys, it's just not worth it.
No.
I mean, because that's the reality of to win a Super Bowl, you're going to have to go through probably at least 2 of those guys every year. And if you don't have one of those guys to go against him, then you might as well just play with what you got and just try to keep making your team better until you get a chance to get one of those guys.
Exactly.
And supposedly next year's draft is going to have 4 or 5, prospects that they feel would already be ranked higher than all of these prospects. And for the record, they said that
see what happens.
5 of the quarterbacks drafted last year would all be ahead of these guys again this year. So it's like, don't desperately reach for somebody that, you're going to be looking for a new quarterback in 2 years anyway.
Well, I I know if I get to pick one, I want it to be Caleb Williams.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm really hoping that the draft plays out where Seattle gets desperate, grabs a quarterback, and a few others. Now, we also have a mind-boggling trade to me, even worse than the Russell Wilson trade, was the Carson Wentz trade. I just... I don't know what Washington is thinking.
Well,
He's a guy that literally had an 11-game stretch where he looked like an elite quarterback.
yeah. In the last 2 games where he looked like the last guy on the roster.
Yeah. And you have, team and teammates. Like, again, if everybody is saying he was an asshole and nobody liked playing with him, and nobody's if your locker room, if they say they bring up the quarterback and nobody is sticking up for them, that says a lot.
Yeah, but you know what? I still got to remember about the signed jersey he sent to your friend.
Oh yeah, I mean that was fantastic.
So I always give him a benefit of the doubt based upon that.
But just based on his on the field play, I mean, I guess again, it's another example of just how desperate people are for a quarterback. That anybody that's shown any mild bit of competence is just like let's go.
What was your take on the Amari Cooper trade?
I mean, you already have Jarvis Landry under contract, who I guess is now given permission to seek a trade. I just don't feel like Amari Cooper is a significant upgrade over Jarvis Landry. I think they're both good route runners who catch the football, but neither of them is a number one. So,
Yeah, I think Jarvis Landry still doesn't have any guaranteed money left on his contract.
yeah. But, I mean, Jarvis Landry went to LSU, was best friends with Odell Beckham Jr., who clearly does not like Baker Mayfield. So maybe if you're going with another season, and Baker's going to be your guy, and you're giving him that one more year to do it. Maybe you want to make sure that whatever you're giving him a new chance to be friends with new people. Maybe.
Hey, I'm gonna spin one for you.
Okay.
I'm thinking Deshaun Watson could end up in Cleveland.
Oh. Now I know that no criminal charges were brought against him yesterday because none of the witnesses wanted to talk that were witnesses outside of
all the civil cases are still alive.
All the civil cases are still alive. But I do like the fact that, it came out that the Steelers were interested, and then the guy that reported that said in all caps, "I have been told they are not interested," which you assume came from somewhere deep inside the Steeler organization.
Yep.
And I think Deshaun Watson's incredible. If he comes back, he's probably a top 10 quarterback. And our team desperately needs a quarterback. But 22 is I don't know if there's a number that's acceptable, but I'm glad we're not going to root for him.
And and the reason I'm saying Cleveland is that they are so desperate, that fan base is so desperate, that I think that would be one place he could land and not get booed.
I think so. I mean, as people pointed out, did we get to talk about Amari Cooper? Or not Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley? Did we talk about that last week? Or was that...
No, we didn't talk about Calvin Ridley.
And as people have shown, they put up the graph of these are the things, people have been suspended for. So the NFL clearly cares about gambling more. But I guess there's a reason, right?
Well, I mean, I'm going to assume that he's still going to get suspended for something, some amount of time.
Oh, yeah. Well, people have brought up
games or something.
People are bringing up Roethlisberger and Ezekiel Elliott, where both those guys got about 6 games each, and I think they both argued them down to 4. Now, Ben had 3 cases against him over the course of his career, as opposed to 22.
Yeah, 22 is a big number. 10 is a big number.
Yeah.
5 is a big number.
Honestly, one, it's, in a terrible way, even if you're Taylor Swift, Dame Judi Dench, whoever you are, if you're a rich, famous person, as a non-famous person, people are trying to take my money all the time illegally. So I feel like no matter who you are as a rich, famous person, I think you get one accusation against you that I can sort of roll with and take your word. But I think if it's multiple, then it just sort of goes out the window for me.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
But, there's going to be a lot of free agent movement this week in the NFL, and we'll see how it all goes. I mean, hoping the Steelers find a couple offensive linemen.
Yeah. I think the one thing that this will be our last Steeler minute, so I'll try to keep this brief. But the one thing that's disturbed me with a lot of the mock draft and scouting stuff, because I feel like if you listen to enough Steeler organization people and scouts, there's not a lot of talk about Kendrick Green being part of the plan going forward. And for a guy they spent a third-round pick on just last year, or second-round pick, third-round pick, third-round pick, because Freiermuth was a second-round pick. I was at least hoping he'd be able to kick over. They had confidence he could kick over to guard. But it doesn't sound like, from what you're hearing, is that they have a lot of faith that he's going to be able to do either, to be what they drafted him to do. So that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Let's go Hoops.
I love the Sixers hosting the Brooklyn Net game. That was a playoff intensity game. People were paying. You saw what they were paying to sit at that game, right? To yell
Yeah, it was a message game.
But Philadelphia fans were paying $4,000 a seat. They were paying for nosebleed seats. They were paying hundreds of dollars just to be there to yell at Ben Simmons.
Yep.
And you could hear the F Ben Simmons chants really clearly. Everybody came to play, and they played. I mean, especially the guys that got traded. Andre Drummond balled out. Seth Curry balled out, and the one guy that didn't ball out once again was James Harden. And
as you and I talked offline, the big games he seems to disappear.
And it was not just that, but I mean, you're in Philly. You took off the Miami game for whatever reason. I assumed you took it off to get ready for this game, to be all in for this game. The crowd couldn't be louder or more intense. Like I said, if it was Game 7 of the finals, I'm not sure it would even have been this loud, at least to start the game. And he was 3 of 17 from the floor. And Kyrie Irving, who I don't think anybody would call a defensive specialist, was picking him up half court, talking trash, and held him to 1 of 10 shooting. And it's hard to imagine, like, even if you're just a lay person and you're on the court, if somebody is riding you like that, you're gonna just. It's hard to imagine you would want to get involved,
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? In this game, is one of those bellwether games. I mean, when they play again, there's even more pressure on Harden to perform.
And I thought,
it seems like the more pressure, the worse he plays.
Yeah. And I thought psychologically what Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving did for Ben Simmons by mentioning, I'm sure that they have their own beef with Harden. Like, it was pretty clear that Kyrie was out trying to embarrass Harden. And KD was like, oh, you don't want to play with us? You think you got a better chance of winning a championship elsewhere? Let me show you. But they made sure to say that, even though he wasn't on the court with them, Ben Simmons is now their brother, and they were showing out for Ben Simmons. And, whether he has real psychological problems or not, that's a great way to ingratiate him into the team and make him feel wanted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm sure that when he makes his debut, which will probably be at home, that he will get a lot of support from the home crowd.
Yeah. But you couldn't have asked for a better. This is the city that, embarrassed me. This is the city I felt here in. And, here's Kevin Durant, the best player in the world. Kyrie Irving, the best scorer on the planet at this point. Basically saying, we're doing this for you, Ben. And shutting up a crowd that was yelling F Ben Simmons is, almost to a person. And they shut them up.
And I still question Seth Curry being in that trade because I thought I wouldn't give him up.
He put up 25 points.
Coming off the bench.
Yeah. And again, when you have Durant and Kyrie out there, and Seth Curry just gets to, slurk around and find open spaces on the perimeter.
Yeah.
He's deadly,
Yeah. And he doesn't have to be the guy. He'll be like the third or fourth option. And I mean, he's gonna be productive. He's gonna be a big piece for that team.
Yeah. Now, obviously, the vaccine is still hanging over Kyrie's head because as of right now, they would play a play-in game in Toronto where Kyrie could not play, and then they would host a couple home games where Kyrie could not play. So,
But we're still a month away, and I think it could be changed in a month.
Yeah.
I think the playoff games he could be playing every game. Maybe not in Canada.
No.
But in the U.S., in New York. So.
Well, just right now, let's just run through it. In the West, Phoenix has already clinched the playoffs.
Yep.
and they are 7.5 games ahead of the number 2 seed, who is now Memphis. Golden State's the 3 seed, and they've looked not super great without Draymond. Utah, who nobody really pays attention to, is in the 4. Dallas and Denver at 5 and 6 are right on their heels. The T-Wolves and Clippers would be your top 8. And with the Lakers and the Pelicans all battling it out for a play-in spot.
Yeah.
I mean,
And Phoenix just signed a guy that was on the Russian team from Denmark. That's supposedly a very, very good international player, guard.
Yeah.
So they had a roster spot. So we'll see what happens with that.
And then in the East, you got Miami in the 1 seed, Milwaukee not far behind them, 2.5 games back. Philly is 3 games behind them. Chicago is 3 games back. Boston, who's been on fire, is 3.5 games back. And then you got Cleveland, who's been fading with a lot of injuries. Toronto, Brooklyn, Charlotte, and the Hawks. And
I think it's going to be a really good playoffs.
Yeah.
Really good playoffs.
And I don't care who I am. I do not want to see Brooklyn in the playoffs if I'm one of those other teams.
And that's what we said a couple weeks ago. We said it would take a while. But I think I wouldn't have written them off even though they were like 500 when the trade was made. And they said this was going to guarantee Philadelphia. And you and I both said that was not going to happen.
No.
That we did not see it being a real positive for Philly, and we thought it would take away from Joel Embiid. Now, we were wrong the first week.
Yeah.
Because they were playing really well. But I think in the long term, once he's there and he gets to interact with those people consistently, he'll wear on them.
Yeah. I mean, say what you want about Russ and Dwight, but they did everything they could for Harden in Houston, including, when the league went crazy and gave him all those ridiculous calls. But then they gave him Chris Paul, and he couldn't get on with Chris Paul.
Yeah.
And, then he couldn't get on with, KD and Kyrie. So history doesn't look good for him. And then, I guess the big story is still the Lakers at 29 and 37, 23.5 games back of first place. They have a nice 3-game lead over the Pelicans and the Blazers. So it looks like they're probably going to be in. And it looks like AD is coming back for the playoffs, maybe. But
I wouldn't take them. If they win the first playoff series, that's as far as I think they go.
Yeah. I can't imagine AD being healthy enough to play more than one series because it's just not in his DNA at this point.
No.
I think I'll just confess on my side. I mean, they have the best record in all of basketball, the biggest lead in all of basketball, and I still feel like I'm counting out the Suns.
Yeah, and I'm not. I think the Suns can win.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I'm like, well, maybe Dallas or Memphis, but I'm like, sometimes the team with the best winning percentage, the best points, all the best across the board, maybe that's the team you're supposed to root for or pick.
But they're still winning without CP3, and they won without Booker. And
Yeah.
I just think that, if this guy from Finland can play, and it gives them a little bit of depth at guard, which they sorely need, that's even better.
And they're in that position where they got close, did not beat Giannis, but came so close. Giannis had, that amazing game to close them out, and now they're hungry and they're ready. And
I know what they missed, and Aiton's a better player this year.
Yeah.
I think Aiton's really improved this year.
Which is still shocking that they didn't sign him to a long-term deal.
Well, based upon what he saw in the playoffs last year, I think that's why.
Yeah.
He didn't raise his game during the playoffs. But this year, who knows?
No, but I think when you increasingly look around the league, if you're the best players, you're going to get Embiid. You're talking Giannis. You're talking Jokic. Karl Towns. And I think,
Yeah.
you need a big guy, an athletic guy that can stay on the floor for 4 quarters. And he's one of the rare ones that can do so, and he's still really young.
Yeah.
It looks like it hasn't affected him, and, the gamble might pay off, but...
We'll have to see. I think he likes where he is. It's where he's from.
Yeah.
So, he played college ball there and everything else. So, we'll have to see. They like the coach. They like the GM. They all fit together well. I think they've got really bright prospects. I'm looking forward to my trip there in May when I go to work with the Suns, work with the business team. to see them in the playoffs.
Yeah. Well,
It's also March Madness time.
it is.
So yesterday I went to the semis of the SEC tourney and saw Texas A&M upset Arkansas. I mean, drum Arkansas. It wasn't even close. And I saw Tennessee beat Kentucky, which is always something I would root for. And so today it's Tennessee, who is much more physical and much bigger than Texas A&M, playing here in less than an hour. And I'm really looking forward to the game. I really like Texas A&M's game. It's real scrappy. It's real quick. It's a little helter-skelter. They play really good D. And I just really like their team. I don't know if they can win another game. I mean, that'd be pretty heady if they beat Auburn, Arkansas, and Tennessee to get in the to get. They'll get in the tournament, but I mean, that would be a pretty amazing tournament if they beat those three teams.
Agreed.
And then, I'm always, this time of year, like I saw the first four in and the first four out, and I see they have Michigan at 17-14 as a team going in. I just think that's an embarrassment. And there's two teams that have and they have Wake Forest out when they have 22 or 23 wins, and SMU had 24, 25 wins, and they have both of those out and Michigan in. I just don't think that's right.
That seems like a very
That's
financial
one of the
decision.
things that I don't like about, those schools with a lot of prestige or a lot of history. They seem to get more love than they should, in my opinion.
Oh, without a doubt. And Michigan's also a giant university with a ton of alumni across the country, and they're a better draw than the other two. I mean,
but they don't deserve to be in at 17-14.
No, they do not. Definitely not.
But Selection Sunday tonight, it'll be fun to see some of the matchups that are coming and where they're going to go. And like I said, I'm going to Pittsburgh this week, and I'm excited to see whoever I'm going to see. So it's always fun. It's a fun time of year. David versus Goliath, that first Thursday and Friday. It's always fun.
Yeah. Well, in entertainment news, I did have one entertainment thing I forgot to talk about. I talked about it with Mom off air.
Okay.
I watched some more Wacky Cult People last night.
Oh, did you watch the Friday night thing?
I did, on what were they? Heaven's Gate Cult.
The Heaven's Gate Cult. Now that was whacked.
And I gotta say, having watched a number of Nexium Keith Raniere things and now watch this one, I've been some pretty low, lonely points in my life, and I just don't think I could get got by a cult. I know the thing is always well, they could be anybody. I'm like, I don't think so.
No. And when you're talking about castration and everybody getting the same haircut and wearing those clothes, I'm sorry, I'd opted out right then and there.
And it sounded like a little kid making up rules for the game. He and his wife are supposed to be immortal beings. And not that, you'd ever want to disparage anybody's death, but she died of cancer, and he was able to be like, oh, it's cool, a different spaceship came and got her, so we're all still all set.
You're going to call yourself Doe and T?
Yeah.
And
but no.
You're fascinated with the sound of music?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't understand, Jason. I just don't understand how, we saw with the Raniere thing and, and Manson and everything. You go on and on and on and on. And I understand the one thing I can really understand is that people have a need to belong.
Of course.
That they need to find their tribe. And you see it in little things. I mean, you see it guys that are techies and roadies, and they dress the same, and they do this, and it's their little club. There's a lot of things they like to do, and they like to be together, and I understand it. I understand the need to be a member of a tribe and feel like you belong. But belonging to that, I'm sorry.
Because again, at least with the the Nexium one, at least in the beginning, you're like, okay, they're doing a lot of psychology stuff to sort of help you break through, and they're talking about being better in your job and business. But I'm like, once you get to the red flags, you should have been run. And this one was a red flag from Jump Street, and people were like, no, I'll get that haircut. That's cool.
And the part that really blew me away is when some of them would leave and then come back.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, how did this what actually happened to you outside that you had to go back? And that one guy that his brother was a doctor.
Yeah.
He just looked delirious the whole time.
He did.
he looked like somebody that was just effed up. I mean, there just was no way. And then the one guy that, had the girlfriend and left and spent like 2 or 3 years out and then went back. And whenever they showed him that, and they tell him to have this happy face and put that goofy smile on, there was something wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, and then to voluntarily, do this to go on the spaceship, I'm sorry. I just don't get it. But it was really, I thought Diane Sawyer does a really good job. That was a really well done one.
It was. Because again, it was just one of those where I'm like, they always want to sign off with like, and be careful, it could happen to anyone. In my mind, I'm just like, I've been really lonely and by myself for a long time in my life. And I'm like, it just, not me. Wouldn't get it. Like,
no, wouldn't get it.
You couldn't get me, sorry.
Scientology, Scientology look a little bit better, right?
It does.
At least they have nice clothes and a nice place to live.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So, but if you want to watch something pretty crazy, it's on Hulu for sure. I'm sure it's on something else, but.
And then tonight is the second episode of the Laker documentary on HBO about the Showtime Lakers with Jerry Buss. And I got to tell you, John C. Reilly does an amazing Jerry Buss. He's very good in it. But they make Jerry West look like an absolute maniac. And I heard he was hard to get along with, and there was a lot of truth to that. But I've already seen people step up and say he would have never done that. He didn't throw things. He didn't have temper tantrums. But I don't know. But it was really engaging.
No, my read on Jerry West has always been that, he's obviously made some incredibly smart calls as a general manager for multiple organizations. He just seems like an incredibly like my way or the highway sort of guy.
Yeah.
And you may not like him.
That he did not want to draft Magic Johnson. That's not who he wanted. And that's why he has a big temper tantrum when they draft him.
That's kind of hard to imagine, but
I know. Like I said, I know. I'm waiting for some commentary from Jerry West.
Because Magic wasn't exactly like, an unknown prospect.
No, it was obvious that, since Larry Bird had been drafted the year before and was going to sign with the Celtics.
Yeah.
It was obvious that Magic Johnson was going to be the pick.
Yeah, it wasn't like, the NFL draft this year, we don't know which quarterback to take. Like, it was like, Magic was pretty much a unanimous 6'9" point. Like, it just.
And Jerry West, and the thing, Jerry West didn't want to draft him because he was too tall to be a point guard, and his dribble would be too high and he'd get the ball stolen all the time, which never happened.
No.
So, but, it was really, really, it's really good. It's might be a little far-fetched, but I thought it was a good story.
What is Adam McKay, the guy that did Anchorman? I know he's done some other stuff that's been less, but
Yeah.
And I attempted to have food, but I ate a bad breakfast yesterday, so I have no food moments for you.
And I attempted to have food, and I had a bad dinner. I'd have a bad dinner. I had a mediocre dinner last night.
Yeah.
So, my standards are pretty high for good Italian food. I was, the place was packed. The service was great. And the food was just so. The best thing I had last night was a limoncello cake.
Oh, I do have a tiny food moment.
Okay.
So we're at Trader Joe's. I was getting my bone broth, because I like to have a bone broth after I work out. And we bought these, they look like peanuts. It's a squirrel in the package. They're like a low sugar peanut butter cup, but they're shaped like a peanut. And they're really good.
Oh.
Now, I would say of decades of eating Reese's peanut butter cups, like it's hard to imagine. That's just the standard.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to imagine. We back in Ohio, we'd eat a Buckeye from time to time. It was good, and so I've had some homemade ones, but this was up there as really good. And again, low sugar.
Was it dark chocolate?
No, it's milk chocolate, and they actually
me because I thought it would be dark chocolate since it's Trader Joe.
No, and in the peanut butter, they actually throw a couple Rice Krispies in there, so you get a little crunch.
Ooh.
It's kind of nice.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go to Trader Joe's and get one now.
Yeah, it's got a squirrel in the package, and they look like chocolate peanuts in the shell.
All right, I got to do this.
So,
that sounds really good.
Just throwing that, I was like, I did have a food. I was like, those are really good. Those are worth mentioning. And if you stick to the package and eat just a serving of 3, it's only like 10% of your daily sugar or something. So,
okay.
You don't. It's difficult to eat just 3. I'm not going to lie, but if you can do that, it's a way to have a nice treat without going too over the board. So.
Okay, I'll get to go check it out.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, enjoy. Get your brackets ready. Watch the selection show tonight, and have fun this week watching some amazing, amazing college basketball on the men's and women's sides. It should be a lot of fun.
And again, sorry for the confusion. This is episode 258. I think I accidentally did 256 twice. Different episodes, but under the title of 256. So we're going to call this 258 and just roll from here.
Sounds good.
So we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.